introduce our moderator, Emily Niehaus, our mayor. State Representative Carl Albrecht. State Senator David Hinkins. State Representative Christine Watkins. Grand County Community Development Director Zachariah Levine. Grand County Council Member Curtis Wells. Grand County Council Member Mary McGann. Moab City Council Member Ronnie Duressery. And Moab City Chief of Police Jim Winder. All of their contact information is provided on the handout you received. As described on your handout, we will begin with an introduction of forthcoming and needed legislation related to all initial topics. If you would like to view any bills or information in detail, please see the grandcounty.utah.leagueofwomenvoters.net.org to see all of the bills that we will discuss this evening. We will then offer time for comments on initial topics by all panel members. There will be a break, and we will allow for questions from the audience. As noted in the handout you received at your entry, citizens in the audience who wish to ask questions after the initial discussions should proceed to the designated microphone area during the first break. Facilitators will be there, these are our facilitators, to assist you as necessary, and you can even have them ask your question for you. Please make your questions as specific as possible without unnecessary editorial comments or criticisms. Your question may be directed to either a specific individual or to all of them. Because the topics listed on your handout are numerous and complicated, we request that your questions initially be related to these topics. If time permits, you can question the panel members on other topics that you feel are important. There will then be a 5-minute break. If time permits, we will discuss forthcoming and needed legislation, and then there will be time for comments on the remaining topics by the panel. I will now give the meeting over to our moderator, Emily Niehaus. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. This is amazing, and Friday night. Good work, Moab. And thank you all for being here as well. I now know what it's like to put yourself out there, and it is thrilling. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to find a seat. If you have a seat next to you, will you raise your hand so that people in the back can find a place to come sit? Keep your hands up for just a minute. People standing, is that helpful? And for people who came last, there's front row for you. The walk of shame is available. And really, I do want to say thank you for all, to all of you for coming. This kind of dialogue is so very important. And to reiterate again, this first hour, we're going to be on a fact-finding mission. We're going to get as much information as we can, specifically about the first 3 topics that are listed to be discussed. And then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go into questions. So if you have questions, be sure to write them down and be prepared for after we go through the discussion with folks in this first hour. So let's get started. The first topic to be discussed is Medicaid issues and proposed legislation, including HB 105, SB 47, and SB 48. So I'm going to turn to the panel right now and ask if anyone would like to get us started. Carl? And we've got 2 microphones up here, so please, when you go to speak, grab the mic and belly up.
Okay, it's good to be with you tonight. Appreciate the great attendance. Last time we had a meeting down here, Senator Hinkins and I had about maybe half this many or less. And they all came for Representative Watkins. Anyway.
Just 1 second. Can everybody hear Carl? No.
Speak up.
Would it help if when they speak that they stand? Yes? Okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry, gals.
Usually my voice carries. Is that better? Okay. House Bill 105, Senate Bill 47, and Senate Bill 48. 105, House Bill 105 is Representative Ward, Raymond Ward. He's a doctor from Bountiful. Basically adds medicated sanctions to a list of programs with non-lapsing authority. Minor changes to existing Medicaid regulations. Senate Bill 47, Medicaid expansion amendments by Senator Davis. I don't know much about this bill. It's in the Senate, but I think it has a 5-year waiting period on it. I haven't seen too much about it. Maybe Senator Hinkins can respond to that one. And Senate Bill 48, Medicaid waiting period. This is a bill that was just proposed by Senator Alan Christensen, and as near as I can tell, he wants a 5-year waiting period on any benefits to any illegal immigrant, including legal immigrant, and a CHIP waiting period as well. So that's just a slight overview for you, Mayor.
Thank you. Christine?
I spoke with Representative Ward about his bill, House Bill 104, and he did what I did. Could you tell me about it? Because we don't always remember the numbers of the bills that we have. And actually, it is making what we do align language-wise with what the feds require. And so it's not going to change anything. It just means that one of our staff at the Capitol will not have to file something every year. All it's doing is making what we do line up with the federal laws. And of course, they always trump us. So that's all that's doing. When I talked to him about it, he says, oh, this is a nothing bill. So, because when I read it, I thought, oh, what is this? So I called him. And so it's basically just like you said, it's a cleanup, and it's just to make it so it aligns with what we're doing.
I'm Senator Hinkins, and a lot of this has to do with what the federal budget does, especially on the CHIPS program that's coming up. Senator Davis's bill is new, and I haven't had a chance to see it, but I think it may be something to do with for expansion for people that's got substance abuse issues that are homeless. As far as I know, that's what it is.
Hello, my name is Mary McGann, and I did read these bills. And like many bills, they are difficult to understand. So after reading them, I was unable to determine if these were bills I supported or did not support. So thank you. It gives me a greater understanding of what the bills mean. However, I did want to say that I believe health care is a right, not a privilege. The second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creators with certain unalienable rights. The right among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without our health care, our life is impaired. And when our health is in jeopardy, our happiness is threatened. If we do not have the right to our health care, what rights do we have? Health care is a right, not a privilege. Elected officials are charged with the protection of their citizens' right. Therefore, we must do all we can to ensure that all citizens have access to quality health care. Thank you.
Excuse me. Hello, my name is Jim Winder. I'm Moab City Chief of Police. A little awkward for me tonight because for those of you who know my former iteration, I was in the political sphere. I'm no longer in the political sphere. In fact, my boss is looking at me closely over this podium. My boss is. With that said, I want to be cautious about my statements, but I do think it's important. One of the reasons I was asked to participate on the panel tonight was perhaps because of some of my experience in a previous life relative to Medicaid expansion-related issues. Previously, I managed an organization that Salt Lake County Jail, where we processed about 50,000 people a year through the Salt Lake County Jail. Most of them were individuals that were affected directly by what Councilwoman McGann just mentioned, and that was a lack of health care. When I left the Salt Lake Valley and came down here, my expectations were that I would see some differences. Unfortunately, I have to say that I have seen no differences. What do I mean by that? Many of the calls that law enforcement engages in on a daily basis revolve around individuals who do not have appropriate access to health care and health-related services. Substance abuse is a prime example. Just today, we responded on a call where an individual who is has substance abuse-related issues, and those substance abuse-related issues are translating to their lifestyle and also to their children. That requires the response of the Moab City Police Department and also the Moab EMS services. In addition to that, we dealt with an individual today who was living in a camper trailer, whose pipes were frozen, and he didn't have enough money for his heat, and he had liver cancer. It's another individual who has been devastated by the lack of medical care and is finding himself on the periphery of our society, and it falls in the hands often of law enforcement and emergency medical services to resolve those issues at usually 5 to 10 times the cost that it would have done to remediate those particular issues. Senator Davis's bills and other bills like that seek to expand Medicaid, in my opinion, are some of the most important issues that we face in our community today. Our federal tax dollars need to be diverted back to our state to expand the very services that they were meant to provide. And I would hope that the legislature and all of our local leadership would look at this, not just through the lens of politics, but through the lens of public safety and health and human services. Thank you.
I'm Ronnie Dressery from the Moab City Council, and I just want to let people know, if you're wondering about your paperwork and some disparity, I'm a last-minute substitution for Kaylin Jones, who had an unfortunate ankle situation this night. So I just wanted to apologize because I'm not as prepared as I normally am. So I will admit, I usually wait with the legislative session I'm a member of the Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Policy Committee, and that's a committee that members of city government, such as our city manager, can be a part of, thinking about voting members, or the mayor, or city council members. And so you can go up to Salt Lake for their meetings during the legislative session, or you can partake by webcast, and we can vote on various things. And then the league basically makes a case and lobbies on the Hill for different cities and towns throughout Utah on legislation that's important to us. So I do try and follow stuff once I have it up, and if people have questions about that, feel free to come and ask me about it, because we usually get a lot more information as things go along, and as these guys have mentioned, things change rapidly once they actually come up. Sometimes they don't. These guys are great resources and really good at responding to any questions you have. Representatives Watkins and Albrecht and Senator Hinkins. So just know we've got a good group of people there. And just on the subject of healthcare, I would just not take up much time, but just reiterate what Mary said. I mean, certainly in the large scheme, if it was up to me, we'd all have universal health care. I think that's so important to basic quality of life, but also we talk all the time about how we value our community and we want a strong workforce and children who have a high sense of self-esteem. And so many of these things are so basic to having a healthy community. And I definitely believe in that. And at the very least, I think that Medicaid expansion for the state of Utah is key. So I will definitely take a look at this, but I'm also concerned about the basic humanity that the state of Utah has traditionally shown to different groups such as immigrants, and I would be very concerned about something that was putting a set time limit on someone's ability to get care. Personally, it's more important to me that we teach people treat people in a humane way than worry about the exact day of their paperwork. If somebody's 4 years and 11 months off and not on that 5-year point and they have a critical illness, that just doesn't work for me. So that would be something I'd be very concerned about, and from the little bit I know so far, opposed to.
Did you want to speak?
I might just add to what all's been said is that there's 5 voter initiatives in the state right now. One of them is Medicaid expansion. I suspect and I feel like that all of these voter initiatives will get the amount of signatures they need to be on the ballot, and then it'll be up to the folks to decide next November, not the legislature. But one of them is Medicaid expansion, and that would increase tax by 0.15% to pay for that. So just keep that in mind as you think about Medicaid overall in the state of Utah. It is an initiative and it has a 1.5% tax increase to fund expanded Medicaid in Utah. Thank you.
Did anybody else on the panel want to speak to this topic? Can I just do a room check? Sound good? Everyone's clear and you can see everyone in the standings working? Okay. If it's okay, I'd like to move on to the next topic. Arches National Park visitation issues and proposed solutions. I asked Kate Cannon if she would come and give us just a brief, because we're on a fact-finding mission tonight, give us a brief overview of the reservation system so that as we comment on the panel and then later in questions, we're focused. Kate?
Thank you, Emily. Good evening. Wow. That's a lot of people. It's great to see the turnout. I'm Kate Cannon. I'm the superintendent of Arches National Park, and I have been since 2006. We consider Moab our home. We've raised our 2 children here, and we've been watching as the town grew and visitation increased. As the park manager, I've been watching the effect that has on the park and on the visitors to the park for 2 simple reasons. Because our job in the Park Service is to keep the parks beautiful and healthy for the public and to provide a great experience for that public when they come into the park. Visitation has spiked, particularly in the last 3 years since 2013, so that now, in the last 10 years, visitation to Arches has increased 90%, whereas nationwide in national parks, visitation has increased 21%. So we are an anomaly. In part, that's because of wonderful advertising by the state of Utah, beginning in 2013, which coincidentally is when our trajectory just rose, and most of our visitation increase has been since then. Those visitors arrive about between 10 and 3 every day, leaving time unused and unoccupied in the morning and the afternoon, and also in the early and late seasons. So we have unused capacity, quite considerable amount of unused capacity, early and late in the day and early and late in the year. If we can meter employees into the park and achieve and reach an ideal condition where visitors can come in, freely go from place to place, readily find parking at those attractions, then that will be a much better experience for our visitors, and we can still fit them all in. We can fit them all in and more, and still have them have a great experience if we can just achieve a steadier stream of visitors into the park. So that's why we came up with a reservation system idea. We have to have something we can implement quickly, because this is a very pressing issue. As many of you know, the traffic congestion at the entrance and at all of the key attractions that people want to see is overwhelming. And it leaves visitors with the frustration not of coming to enjoy their beautiful park, but of searching for parking, sometimes parking up to a mile away along the roadsides and walking back in traffic to the attraction site. That's not a recipe for happy visitors and a continuing growth at Arches. So with a reservation system, we felt that we could readily and fairly quickly achieve that redistribution of visitors, and we discovered that in doing that, not only was it entirely feasible, but we had room for at least 40% growth in visitation overall as a result. The reservation system as planned would not do a couple of things. It would not require commercial operators to have a reservation. So tour buses, local COA holders, people who have a need to sell entries to the park or to sell businesses that will support an entry into the park don't need a reservation. They will be, under the plan, they would be managed under their commercial use authorizations. That's one of the things that people were concerned about. People are also concerned about the reservation system itself, which would, as currently planned, would run from March through October. That's a little past. That's after the season starts to be reduced. The rest of the year, the park would remain wide open like it is. In addition, even during that reservation block, you wouldn't need a reservation if you came in before 7 or after 6. And actually, in our busiest month, which is June, about 440 cars each and every day through June, on average, comes in before and after. And they don't need a reservation and would not need a reservation. In addition, if you have a reservation and then you don't have a time you have to leave. Once you're in, you can stay as long as you want to. Let's see, what else were some of the issues? One of the things, and this is a particularly good crowd to ask this of, is we know that locals hold their parks dear. I'm one, and I think that it is difficult for local people to consider having to make a reservation to get into the park that they've freely entered all this time. So we've asked people, and will continue to ask people, as a local, what would work for you? We'll have to sort through those and see what we can legally do, but we need some help figuring out what would work. There's no use coming up with a solution if it doesn't suit you. So please, even though we're past the comment period, if you can shoot us some emails or some ideas on how to do that, we'd appreciate it. There's a lot more than that, but I think those are the key points at right now. And how are we going to do questions and so forth?
Well, what we're going to do now is open up to the panel for comments. And I was contacted by somebody who another person out there that wants to also make a couple of comments, but I'd like to now just open it up to the panel. We're going to comment, and then we're going to move on to the third topic, just so that everyone here tonight can hear what your representative's feedback really is about the system, because that might spur on some questions that you might have. So who on the panel would like to start with a comment. And maybe, because I'm assuming there's going to be a lot, maybe 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes for your comments. Does that sound good? Curtis?
This is an issue that the Grand County Council has been deliberating on and discussing a lot lately. It is a complex issue. You know, on one hand, speaking for myself, I recognize the success that we've had in promoting tourism, that the state's had in promoting tourism, and specifically the national parks through the Mighty Five campaign. Also, on the other hand, realize that the logistical dilemma that's placed in the parks in terms of transportation and just sheer volume of tourists. A significant portion, I believe, of our economy is due to the successful promoting of tourism. It's important to me that we manage that effectively. What that looks like, I would like to see a collaborative process where we can get a result that is more inclusive. It's important to me that the Park Service follows through on the appropriate NEPA process. Right now, as proposed, it looks like an environmental assessment through the NEPA process. Environmental impact study is a more intensive process that can better examine potential negative economic concerns. I think it's fair to say that if you, this is a pretty significant step, and not that there's a driver for it, but on a little town with an economy like this, I think it's fair to say that this could be a drastic measure. From the county's perspective, we promote tourism through the Travel Council. We have to look out for Main Street. We have to look out for the citizens. We've really tried to, and I've really tried to approach this as a partnership, with the Park Service, with the city of Moab, and that, we're all pulling on the rope in this community. We need to make sure that the solutions that we move forward to mitigate these kinds of issues are sound and don't bring any unintended consequences. There are a lot of opinions on just how big of a role that Arches National Park plays in this economic machine, and there are variances in opinions on that. Some folks think more than others, but sound solutions are necessary. It's something we'll continue to work on. There's been other options. Everyone, if there's one thing in this small town in a political climate, everyone has their own ideas on how to solve the park's problems, whether that's a north entrance, that's a transit system. There's been a lot of dialogue about it, but there's one thing for certain, that the process in which we get there is important, that the Park Service follows the same rules for the NEPA requirements that you all have to and that I have to, and that we make it right.
Thank you, Curtis. And I just want to say, if you guys go over 2 minutes, I think what I'm going to do is just do a little shake here, just to keep us on the ball, okay?
Mary McGann. The reservation system has worked in other parks around the nation. It works at Statue of Liberty, Ellis Islands, various Smithsonians, and the World Trade Center. When I went to Washington, D.C. last June, we had to get reservations to attend some of the Smithsonian displays. To go to the Holocaust Museum, we had to get a reservation. So it has worked in other places. I am not up in arms over the reservation system as much as I am concerned about the overcrowding in our park. It is apparent that a large number of businesses in our community are concerned, however. Therefore, I am in support of looking closely at other solutions. But something needs to happen quickly. And if a reservation system is used while other ideas are developed, knowing that if it is evident that the reservation system is negatively impacting our community, that we cease the reservation system. But something needs to be put in place quickly, and the reservation system is the quickest thing we can do while we look at other solutions. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but I'm just going to add that I did attend a lot of the meetings that we've had on the subject, and I do feel like it has been discussed a lot. Like the Park Service has made a good effort to put options out there, and other people in the community have tried. And so far, from what I've looked at, it's the best option I've seen. So I welcome more dialogue on it, but I do believe that from people I talk to, a big part of their reason for visiting national parks is for the experience that they have while they're there, and they are less likely to show up or tell their friends to show up if things are very crowded or very impossible to park. So this is one of the options I've heard about that seems like it would help with that and also help the Park Service manage the park land. But I think we are sometimes overlooking another issue that's happening in parallel to this that is really an opportunity for us, is that more and more when we look at people recreating around the U.S., people want to be outdoors. They want to go out and they do things, and they want new places to go. And I think in many ways this is an opportunity for us to both protect and look out for arches in the long term, but also look at providing more opportunities for other places for people to go and trying to help the communities around us. So maybe encouraging people to go to the Beers National Monument or go explore other places, say on the road to Mighty, as the Utah Tourism Council has been doing. But it does seem like the Park Service has tried to work with people and offered some options, and as said, you can go in early to the park, you can go in late. It's only during the heavier months of the year, which probably a lot of us are trying to avoid with our families anyway, but if you're in business, there still are options for you to get in. I'm happy to hear from other people, but it really is the best, most thought out and really process that I feel like people have worked on, and we as a community have taken part in meetings. So I'll leave it at that.
Hi there. Like Jim, I will do my best to be careful with my language tonight. I'm also an administrative staff person, and two of my bosses are sitting to the right. So I'll be sharing my own personal thoughts and professional thoughts on matters tonight. I would just like to add to the Arches conversation that, in my opinion, what's going on in Arches is really a microcosm of what we're trying to address as a community at large, dealing with growth management issues. So whether it's a bottleneck at the entrance station at Arches or impacts to our sewer system or traffic on Main Street, what we're really trying to do is preserve quality of life, and at the park, quality of experience, of course. And so I think that we would all do well to look at the park as maybe a harbinger of some of the really pressing issues that we have to deal with as a community. And I don't envy you, Kate, as kind of the point person for the National Park Service, but I appreciate you and your willingness to grapple with these really complex issues. As a planner, we turn these wicked problems, complex issues, not clear solutions, multiple actors, multiple decision factors. And so it's not going to be easy for us to address all of the issues, and right now we're just trying to address transportation. But we are also talking about the quality of experience, the integrity of the environmental resources, etc. I share Mary's sentiment that even if the reservation system is a go and that is put in place, I would very much like to see an ongoing discussion and collaboration with the Park Service and local representatives to explore the implementation of other solutions. Personally, I'm very supportive of things like intelligent transportation systems, which involve distributed real-time information that can enable people to make more informed decisions before traveling out to the park. Alternative transportation modes like electric e-bikes or electric bikes and shares. Am I off? Okay. And then I would just also point out that in addition to the reservation system, I have some concerns personally about the proposed increase in entrance fees. There is research that has evidenced that increased fees do have the ability to exclude certain demographic groups. And the Park Service already has a challenge in attracting non-white, non-affluent visitors, and we don't really want to exacerbate that challenge by increasing fees. That's also a complex topic, and perhaps we'll get to it.
Well, myself and Representative Albrecht and Representative Watkins, we serve on the Appropriations Committee for the Natural Resources Committee here in the state of Utah, which oversees our state parks. And on behalf of Utah State Parks, we're pleased with the reservations and the $70 increase of fees, because the last time they shut down the national park, our increase of our visitation went like 5-fold, and so it was the most profitable year that we ever had. In state parks, we was able to invest about $5 million over the last couple of years in upgrades of the state park, and so we welcome it. We, because of the Mighty Five, it's brought everybody down here, but we've actually been a benefactor as well. But it's a state park, as also as Canyonlands and the other parks. We appreciate it, but we do know there is a backlog of things that needs to be done at the parks, and therefore to be able to generate more money for it is probably more welcome for the park services as well, because I think 80% of the money that's the visitation fees that comes is able to be kept in the state park or in the national parks, and so that's a big benefactor to the area and for employment, and as well as contractors and people that work at the park. So thank you.
Does anybody else on the panel want to speak to the reservation system? Ashley, you've got 2 minutes if you'd like it. If you'd like them. Why don't you please come up to the microphone, just because of recording, and use this one. And you've got 2 minutes, so there you go.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Kornblatt. I own Western Spirit Cycling. And we have permits in about 12 parks around the West. And I'm also part of a nonprofit called Public Land Solutions. And we help communities that are looking to get a piece of this action in their economic development. So I have a lot of experience in national parks. In fact, last year, one of my guides almost got in a fist fight with a ranger in Glacier National Park over a parking spot. So it is a problem, but it's not just a transportation problem. I think it's really important that we understand that it's a congestion problem, because even once you get in the park, the congestion in the park has really degraded the experience. So I think our primary goal has to be to maintain the quality of the experience, because if the quality of the experience in Arches really keeps degrading, keeps getting worse, and there's all that uncertainty, you don't know if you should take your family there. Do you need to pack lunch and dinner in the car while you wait in line to get in the park? Like, there's so much uncertainty and so much unpleasantness out there that it's imperative upon us to do something about it. And I'm really confident that the reservation system is going to work. It gives people certainty. It spreads out use over the day, and I've seen it work in lots of other parks, so I'm for it strongly. I think it's great, and we can amend it later if we need to, but I think Moab and Grant County should be on the cutting edge of solving these types of problems. We want to be the community that's embraced the problem and moved on into the future and figured it out so that we are providing our visitors with the most high-quality experience that we can.
Thank you, Ashley. It's important that we hear from our business community as well about the topic, so that's why I allowed her to speak. And I just wanted to say, too, that regardless of whether or not we agree or disagree with the reservation system, it's important to me that we realize that Kate is a human being that has raised a family here and lives in our community. She's accessible and is doing what she thinks is best for her business. And so, you know, I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the problem solving that you're going through. So, with that, I want to move on to the next topic. HJR1, Joint Resolution Urging Exemption from the Antiquities Act, and HJR2, Joint Resolution. So, we are so lucky that our representatives have sponsored 2 bills jointly for this legislative session. I want to just start off by saying thank you. It sometimes feels like, you know, when you're on the other side, that, you know, are we being represented? So it's important to say We've got 2 representatives here that have put forward a bill. That means that can happen. So if we want to see bills put to our state legislature, then this is possible. And with that, I just want to lead into a conversation from the panel, starting off with a presentation about these 2 bills.
Thank you, Mayor. These are 2 resolutions that I'm sponsoring. I also have a few bills that I'll be sponsoring as well. Let's talk a minute about the Antiquities Act and why I decided to sponsor this joint resolution. And remember, it just is a resolution. If it's passed in the House, it goes to the Senate, has to be signed by the governor, and then it would go to our congressional delegation. But I got thinking a lot about the Grand Staircase and the Bears Ears and what's happened, and I don't need to fill you in on any of that, but I got thinking, how can we resolve these issues between one administration and another in the future, and how they see this? And I thought, you know, maybe we need to urge our congressional people to do away with the Antiquities Act as far as it applies to Utah. Maybe Utah should be exempt. And I thought, you know, there is precedence for that. Wyoming and Alaska are both exempt from the Antiquities Act. And we just continue to kick this football from one side to the next. A lot of agitation, a lot of feelings. And I thought, you know, there ought to be a better way. And to do that, I thought, let's try to get Utah exempted. And the reason for that is I think, you know, we're smart people here in Utah, most of us. And I think we could work together from the bottom up instead of the top down all the time. I managed to co-op that when the Grand Staircase was created, an electric co-op over there in south central Utah, Garcane Power. And when that monument was designated 1.9 million acres, it took the heart right out of our electrical system as far as working on the lines and maintaining the lines and so forth. We dealt with that for 20 years. And then here comes the next administration and creates 1.35 acres in the Bears Ears. I'm not against protecting those things. But I thought, you know, a lot of that is sagebrush and pinyon and juniper, and there's a lot that needs to be protected. And I'm not here to argue what's been done. I'm just trying to find a solution in the future. Because I think these things need to be resolved. If we have something we want to protect, let's work with our local leaders and take it up, not top down. Nobody with a stroke of the pen should be able to set aside 1.9 or 1.35 million acres. That's ludicrous. And so let's just look at my resolution for a minute. And I might say that, you know, already we have 5 national parks, 7 national monuments, 3 national recreation areas, 6 national forests, and 22 million acres of BLM land in Utah. We're a public land state, and we're going to remain public land state. So that's 47% of our state, of our land mass in Utah that's administered by the BLM. 65% of all the land mass in Utah is public land. Some counties are 90 plus. Grand County's about 87%. So I'm not here to create a stir and create one side against the other. I just think maybe we ought to take a look at this and do what Wyoming and Alaska did. Because I think it's important that we work from the bottom up instead of the top down, which always creates a political football and creates feelings and everybody's mad at each other. We can do better as Utah citizens. And I think this is something that maybe we should consider. So that's why I filed this resolution.
I'm sorry, I called it a bill and it's a resolution. My apologies. Senator Hinkins, do you want some time to speak on it as well?
Right.
Because this is a resolution that you are both co-sponsoring, correct?
I'm the Senate sponsor.
Okay.
A surety is one of the biggest things the community could have, whether they can build or not build. And most of this stuff is one of the most, the Taylor Grazing Act is probably the foundation of public lands. And it's a congressional act. It can't be rescinded. It can't, unless Congress does it. And so we think that things should be congressionally declarated rather than a president being able to, especially tie up so much land and then to have somebody come back and take it away and back and forth. And so we're trying to get some stability to this, and that's the reason for the resolution. And I appreciate Representative Albrecht for allowing me to be his floor sponsor in the Senate. Thanks.
Well, come on, panel.
Before I talk on this resolution, I do want to mention that, yes, our representatives do help us. Last year, Senator Hinkins and Christina Watkins, Representative Christina Watkins, both co-sponsored a resolution to encourage the quicker and a faster removal of the tailings pile on the side of our river. So thank you very much. And Ronnie and I are working with them presently on a resolution to deal with overnight rentals and the noise from recreational vehicles, UTVs and ATVs being allowed to run on our streets. So they are here to serve us, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. However, on this resolution, I can't support it. In Utah, outdoor recreation generates $12.3 billion in consumer spending annually, $737 million in state and local revenue. It is among the top 4 most powerful economic sectors in the United States. Monuments and parks, more often than not, improve the economics of an area. And to say with a stroke of a pen is misleading. President Obama sent his Secretary of Interior to the area to look and to examine and to explore. It wasn't a stroke of a pen, it was an extensive study. So saying a stroke of a pen, I believe, is misleading. In the 1960s, I was friends with Bates and Robin Wilsons, and I went to the public hearings here in Moab, Utah. They were held at Star Hall, where they talked about the development of Canyonlands National Park was being proposed. The proposal did not receive strong support from the community or the state. As the Bible says, truly I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. In the same vein, often the value and the beauty that surround your hometown is not recognized by the locals. It often takes an outsider to see the need to protect an area, thus the need for the Antiquities Act. Thank you.
Okay, more clapping means less information. So who's next?
Okay, well, I want to tell Representative Albrecht, don't be afraid to stir things up around here. They can take it. We disagree quite a bit, and it's a healthy climate. So I support this resolution. I think by a stroke of a pen, what that means to me is the Antiquities Act has turned into a very rough tool. I mean, anyone that could describe what's happened in the Bears Ears Proclamation, the Reed Proclamation, as being a smooth study, I would beg to differ. Yes, the Obama administration did send Secretary Jewell down. I attended many of the meetings at town halls. You did feel kind of a predetermined result. There's something wrong when all 3 elected county commissioners of San Juan County do not support this. And one of those who resides in Montezuma, in the Indian Reservation. There's something to be said for that, folks. And with a stroke of a pen, to force that kind of heavy policy straight down on top of people who are elected by those locals, those people that have lived on that land, that manage that land, that call that their home, doesn't mean they don't welcome people to visit, but that they take a different position from administration that's running analysis from Washington, D.C., and we'll get to that later in the agenda. You should all question that. I feel like we should all question that. Is that the best way to go about doing that? Before the Bears Ears National Monument, what was the concern or what was the goal? It was the Greater Canyonlands National Monument. We all know. It was to encompass the Green River Corridor, and that was the target of special interest groups. That's what the press was reporting. That's what everyone was discussing. In an instant, it was Bears Ears, and what preceded that was not a study or a search to see is it really endangered, or what do the folks down there really want. It was a political decision using a tool that is very, very rough. Those decisions should come from the bottom up, not the top down. Thank you.
I'll try to add 2 relatively short cents. In terms of, to me, one of the largest problems we have right now facing us as a nation is the situation of one president doing something with the Antiquities Act, and then one coming and trying to rescind that, and the larger question of what that means about your democracy in the long term. So I'll just leave that at that. But I also have great respect for Mr. Hinkins and Ms. Watkins and Mr. Albrecht, and I'm very grateful for all the help they've given us. But certainly, I've tried to talk to people in the community, and I've gone down to Blanding when not only Jewell was there, but Secretary Zinke, and spoken to people, and I do feel like the Antiquities Act has so many reasons, legislatively and in terms of science and policy, that it exists, that there's just so much else going on here that it's a little bit too simple of a solution to look at getting rid of it, and we kind of have to face the larger problems before us, is that we do fundamentally disagree and will continue to fundamentally disagree over history about some of these issues, but I think we do have to tackle some of those. I don't think exempting Utah will help us. I think there are a lot of good things in the Act. It's not perfect, but I think those are some of the discussions we have to be having, and some of my concerns, the results around this are sometimes how the Antiquities Act and how discussions happen or portrayed, because there were a lot of meetings that happened in different places. We have, for example, along Grand Staircase now a lot of businesses that were formulated in families who've raised families and employed people around Grand Staircase. And take, for example, the Hell's Backbone Grill in Boulder, Utah. I mean, they're known nationwide and, in fact, internationally for the food and the community that they've built there. And if you listen to interviews with them, they are there because of the monument and the land there. And I mean, I think we have to face the larger problem too of, we're talking about federal lands. They don't, certainly it's very important that we locally voice our opinions and that people understand where we're coming from. But I do think we do need to remember that they're federal, and this is a bigger discussion than just us.
I'm sorry, I forgot one important thing. It'll only take a second.
Oh boy.
I wanted to mention that we have 5 great national parks in our state, and they are a very big driving force of our economy. Everyone has to admit that. All 4 of them were, only 4 of the 5 were created because of the Antiquities Act. Arches, Zions, Bryce, and Capitol Reef are here because of the Antiquities Act. Thank you.
Okay, so given my first disclaimer, I wouldn't dare talk about this joint resolution directly. But I will just share a couple of perspectives of mine that I think approach this question in a different light. And I think about the geographic areas in the state of Utah where the 2 monuments that have been referenced are located. So, in the San Juan County area and then the Garfield-Kane County area. And, for me, I really get back to the question of, what is the goal of the national monument and the public lands designations, and certainly land protection is one component of that. But I think that another major component that we really need to be talking about and is potentially equally important is rural economic well-being and the well-being of the host communities and the gateway communities to these public lands. And, when I think about San Juan County and Garfield and Kane County, these are, quite frankly, economically depressed areas in the context of what's going on in the commodities markets globally. And, certainly recreation economies have, many benefits, and Moab is a great success story of all of the wonderful things that can come with a robust tourism economy. But, as an academic researcher and a community and economic development professional, I wouldn't say that it's all rosy as well. There are definitely some shortcomings to recreation economies. And so, in the context of whether a national monument is good or bad for a community, I would just say that we should really couch that question in the context of rural economic well-being. And is a national monument going to solve the issues that some of these economically depressed areas are dealing with, such as a lack of workforce development, rural health care, quality of life amenities that attract talented individuals? And we should really be getting at the underlying issues rather than, some of the surface level issues.
One of the things that's been talked about is one of the rules that the federal government has is NEPA studies has to be done to grounds that the uses are going to be changed on it. That's one of the things that's overlooked by the Antiquities Act. There's no NEPA studies that's done, and another thing that was mentioned that it's all federal land, and that's incorrect. 10% of the land is at least SITLA ground, which is state institutional trust lands that's enclosed within all these designations, and that's the benefactors of our children and the school system. And so I think that needs to be taken into consideration, because anytime that happens, then after they make the designation, then after the fact, they come in and try to negotiate a good deal with the schools, which is almost impossible because Big Brother's got the upper hand on the children of the state of Utah. So I think that that's one of the things that, if they do it the right way, which is enacted in Congress, the congressional way to do it, and they go around and do the NEPA studies, and part of a NEPA study is the impact on the community and economic benefactor of it. And so 25 to 30% of that should be, and go around and talk to the ranchers and the businesses, the loggers, the ones that we've shot down all the mills on the Escalante, that there's not anywhere there for timber. And so people wonder why their housing costs have gone up because of the lumber and things like that. Is because we can't use our natural resources, which it's a renewable resource. Trees are grown every day. I mean, they replanted and they've harvested, and it's part of the economy. So I think that it needs to be done right, and Congress is the ones that's been designated to do things.
Yep. Mary got 30, so you got 30 seconds.
I just want to provide that, because you hear about the value of monuments and parks. And to me, when I discuss this joint resolution with my legislators, both as an elected official but as a constituent, this isn't about recognizing or not recognizing the value of these, a park or a monument. It's about the process in which we get there. We've used the Antiquities Act, or it's been used to create monuments and then parks. But at what point does the process become flawed? Where do you draw the line? Where does local input matter? This resolution is not about necessarily the end result coming from the top down. This is about a correct process that gets everyone to the right result.
Do we have any other panel comments or any other panel comments? Because I'd like to give 2 minutes to somebody in the audience. Walt Dabney, would you like to come up and just, you get 2 minutes too. I think you've got to use my microphone.
Okay, 2 minutes. Thank you for being here. Just a little history real quick, and Mary mentioned some of that. The Antiquities, since the Antiquities Act, a number of areas.
Introduce.
I'm sorry, I'm Walt Dabney. I'm
what
retired. I was with the National Park Service for many years, and then was retired as the director of state parks in Texas, and then came back out here because Texas has no public lands, and I wanted to be out here where there's lots of public land. Antiquities Act has set aside a number of very important places. Yes, with a stroke of a pen, but with the ability of Congress at any time to undo any of those. And so that wherewithal to undo them is there, and that process is in place. If you left it to local people for these private lands, in many cases, none of these places would be here, including the ones Mary said, which were opposed by locals. Grand Canyon, the bill to establish Grand Canyon National Park was defeated locally 3 times. And Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, set it aside in 1909 as a national monument. If you tried to undo that now and say we're going to sell it or make a lake out of it or whatever you're going to, people would come absolutely unglued. Grand Tetons is the same way. Olympic National Park is the same way. And so you can always undo them. Something you may not know is another one of these stroke of the pen laws that were in effect was the Forest Reserve Act of 1881. If it weren't for that act, Teddy Roosevelt in 1903, when he stroke of a pen set aside the Manti-La-Salle National Forest, including the La Salles up here, if you go up the place where all the purple paint is that says do not leave this road, that's what the whole place would be if Teddy hadn't have done that. So we need to be very careful before we give up our ability to set aside stuff that if we decide later we need to undo, we can undo it with an act of Congress. There's people of 49 other states that are paying to take care of these places now, and they care a lot about them. So a lot of the places we have today would not have existed if it weren't for this authority, and again, we can undo them later if we need to. But thank you for being here, and thank you for letting me speak.
I hope that these comments lead to connections. We can begin to see where we want to spend our energy, who we want to contact. Let's take 5-minute break. 5-minute break. Stand up, move around. I want to right now lead everybody in clapping for sticking around on Friday night. And we're going to start back again in 5 minutes.